Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Search Solutions for PR Problems. This webinar is sponsored by Lightbox Search and brought to you by CommPRO. My name is Jesse Jacobs. I am the CTO of Lightbox Search, and I'll be your host for about the next hour. Lightbox Search is a new technology that helps PR professionals prove ROI through search and provide search solutions with easy-to-use automated features. We'll be dropping some information into the chat if you'd like to reach out or learn more about that. Today's discussion will kick off with a fireside chat as two visionaries discuss their perspectives on the evolution of PR and search. Gentlemen, could you please turn on your cameras? All right, great. Hey, I am pleased to introduce Larry Weber. Yes, that Weber, the visionary who built Weber Shandwick into the world's largest communications firm by leveraging technology. He's also now the CEO of Racepoint Global. Larry Weber is joined by my good friend and colleague, Larry Moskowitz, Larry M., who was the founder and CEO, of MediaLink Worldwide, the first PR services firm to go global and public. He is now the CEO of Lightbox Search. How are you guys doing today?
Just fine. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I think just feel free to take it away and sort of tell us about, where you see the industry today and, how you've seen it evolve over time.
Well, I'll say a word about Larry. He's a guy that I think from his early days in Boston with a small agency recognized immediately that technology was constantly evolving, then a little bit more slowly than today, and built up his own firm, which became a thought leader very, very quickly. He not only used technology and leveraged it, but he had a lot of technology clients. In those days, Boston was a hotbed of them. In fact, one of the earliest search engines was created by the venture capital company that first funded my company, American Research and Development, which also founded DEC, which created Alta Vista, which was a client of Larry's. So he understood that technology had to be marshaled in order to succeed with PR, and that catapulted him into the merger with Shandwick and under the new name Weber Shandwick, built the world's largest PR firm, constantly staying ahead of technology. So he's always got open eyes. He always comes up with a new phrase, so it shows the old PR guy in him. But it's use the word earned, not only for media, but earned search. We usually use the word organic. So I love that one. We might steal that, Larry, with your permission. So I wanted to thank him. He was also a great supporter and user when I used to run PR Newswire, because I founded a forerunner of that before MediaLink, and then we formed a strategic alliance with MediaLink when it's in its earliest days. So we go back quite a ways with that. So he's not only been smart in terms of utilizing technology, but early at it, and then also having technology clients, as I mentioned before, and growing with them. So he had to stay on top of it. So that's my 2 cents of introduction for him, and he's been kind enough to co-host this little chat about how now this next frontier shouldn't be a frontier at all, because it's been with us. We don't even realize it's the air around us. It's called Google. And so no earned media, no blog, no social media has really reached without going through Google first. Google is the lens. It's so obvious and so around us that it isn't obvious, and it's not known that it's around us. Yet, who's last plugged the www into their into the search bar? It don't happen. You go through Google first. So what Google says first is your first impression, and I think predates Larry and I's birth and our names. That the whole notion of search is something that it just happened. Unlike social media, which we saw coming like a tsunami, search just all of a sudden bubbled up around us. So now we have to take charge of it. And the panel here today are brilliant experts at understanding that and bringing the PR industry, I think with Larry, it's queuing up Larry now, has often been 5 years, 10 years, sometimes 20 years behind in terms of really understanding the technologies that so many other industries have already mastered. So that's the end of my intro to our Fireside Chat about how search has become the dominant entry point for all stakeholders. Larry?
Thanks, Larry, and thanks for being a visionary as well, especially around the visualization of data and now the use of search in earned media, which I can't believe it's taken this long, but thank you for doing that. So I go pretty far back with search technologies. We launched, from a PR perspective, the first one called Magellan, and I think it was 1994. It was just after Tim Berners-Lee. We had introduced HTML in early '93. And when he moved his research from CERN in Switzerland to the Lab for Computer Science at MIT. So I was determined to continue to use technologies in PR, especially since we were, as Larry had pointed out, we're around technology companies and innovation all the time. And even though when some of you probably don't know this, but when we first, about that same time, we were starting to finally be able to have videos in the computer. We needed a very powerful computer, and it had to be really dark in the conference room. And so people would be spilling coffee and water and you know, hitting their legs on the chairs, getting up and down. But I was determined to use the new technologies that were available. And search was always lurking there. I go fast forward to 2003, and I'm at Brainstorm, what it used to be called, one of those, you know, highfalutin sort of gatherings of thinkers out in the Aspen Institute. And I met these two guys named Larry and Sergey, and we had a long chat over a glass of wine. And they said the whole magic to search is to figure out how to monetize it, because I want it to be free. And I said, well, Google is free. And he goes, yeah. But we had introduced about 6 months before that something called AdSense. And that, of course, changed everything because it monetized what Google's invention was. And that made all the other search engines pretty much obsolete. And I kept saying to myself, and I said to them, we need an AdSense for PR. We need to figure out how to make, you know, the search of influencers, the search of content, the search of all media outlets. How do you do that so that we can not just measure for our clients, but we can have more impact than our advertising brethren? So as usual in the PR industry, the ad guys went running to develop ad tech everywhere. And to the point where you just started to get confused. What I see happening with earned media is it rises and paid media becomes a supporter of owned and earned. I see the importance of being able to use tools, especially like search, extremely important. So not to put down data and analytics and the understanding of unstructured data in social, which are also areas that PR people have to get to. I'm hoping that some of the universities like USC, San Jose State, Columbia, start really looking at some of these tools for earned media. AI obviously is going to help with content creation in the future. It already is in some of the some areas of PR. I was talking with Richard Edelman about a month or so ago, and we were really passionate about the idea of both search for earned media and also for content creation. Once you know some content's working, why not develop it more and target it more to your constituencies? So I think this is a breath of fresh air that we're having an hour on this. I can't wait to hear the other panelists. because they're really down in the trenches of all this work. But I think to use technology and innovation, not for just technology's sake, but to use it to actually have more impact for the work we're doing in earned media through influence, because I still believe the definition of marketing is the influence of opinion through content. And that's what we do best. And I think tools like this are going to really be very helpful to us.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Larry. And Larry, I think this is a fantastic transitioning point to invite our other speakers to turn their cameras on. I think you made a really cool point, by the way, that I had never really heard before, was AdSense's role in helping Google transition to being that dominant search engine. We always hear that Google is the dominant search engine with like 92% of the global search usage, but you don't really think of necessarily the intricacies of how it got there. So thank you for that cool perspective. And hello, everybody. Thank you for turning on your cameras and joining us today. I'd love it if everyone could take a moment just to kind of go around and introduce themselves. Maybe start with Linda. You are muted.
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Linda Descano. I'm an executive vice president with Red Havas, which is a merged media agency network within the global Havas group. I lead our corporate communications and executive visibility practice, and I also drive all of our global marketing and thought leadership, and delighted to be talking about this topic today.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to have you. John? You are muted too.
Mute.
I turned it off and then I turned it back on. I got excited. Sorry about that. My name is John Randall. I'm an executive vice president at BCW, focusing obviously on digital in the corporate affairs practice, working on clients, across the board from consumer to anyone else who needs, public affairs and support, especially in the digital space.
Awesome. Awesome. Going down the line. David, hey.
Hey, I got my mute situation figured out. My name is David Harrison. I'm an executive vice president at Evins Communications. We are a New York City-based PR firm. I handle all of our branding and digital initiatives, as well as how that interfaces with PR and storytelling. So search is a huge part of what we do every single day, how we communicate with our clients and with our constituents. So really happy to be here, really excited about this conversation.
Awesome, and we're happy to have you as well. Matt, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Matt Sato. I'm also an executive vice president with Edelman. So I'm part of their data and intelligence organization, and I run the predictive analytics business in the US.
Really cool, really cool. Julie, how are you?
Hi there. Hi all. My name is Julie Orsini. I'm a senior associate director at APCO Worldwide, based out of Washington, D.C. I sit in APCO's Public Affairs Advisory Group, specializing in integrated public affairs and digital communications campaigns for issues, brands, coalitions across a variety of sectors. And I also advise on corporate communications and reputation management. Happy to be here today. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you for joining us. Neil, how are you today?
Fantastic. I hope everyone is well. I'm Neil Foote, old school journalist, new school storyteller, president of Foote Communications and Integrated Public Relations Marketing and Branding Firm, and president of the National Black Public Relations Society. Looking forward to this conversation. I remember back in 1995 explaining to the publisher of the newspaper I worked for how Yahoo worked and why our newspaper wasn't showing up in the search engine. Didn't matter, we didn't have a website at the time, but that's another conversation. Looking forward to this conversation. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. And that was a really cool introduction. I'm a little jealous. Aaron, you're last but not least. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Winkler. I'm a director of analytics at Ketchum. I'm coming up on 5 years here out of the Washington, D.C. office. My specialty within the analytics group has always been digital analytics. And joining 5 years ago, search wasn't even something that I was thinking about, but something that our group wanted to move in the direction of. So, took a bunch of educational classes and a lot of trainings to really bone up on what it is that, people search for online and why that's important. And like I always say, people live their best lives on social media and their true lives on search. So always excited to implement that within any sort of PR comm strategy.
That's a cool line. I hadn't heard that one either. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's obvious we have a lot of collective expertise in the room or in the Zoom, and I'm really excited to jump into things. Before we start asking our panelists any questions, we're going to do a little 2-question poll. We're going to ask the audience to participate, and then we're going to reveal those answers at the end. We'll be asking, kind of those questions through the course of the discussion to our panelists as well, and so you can see how you stack up against the experts. Faye, can you give us a hand with that? There it is. I think we'll have about 15 or 20 seconds to fill that out, and then we will move on. All right. Okay, I think by now everyone should have had a chance to answer. So I'll start with my first question, which I will open the floor. I will open it to the floor for all of our panelists. Question number 1, straight from the poll. Do you see search as central to your PR efforts? Does anyone want to chime in with a response? I'm seeing John's hand go up first. Please join in.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this panel if I didn't think the answer was yes to begin with, but no, I think search is an absolutely critical part of, any PR communications approach. I always use an analogy that if someone's raising their hand, or if you're asking a question, they're raising their hand, you want to be the first person there with the answer. So to me, that's where search is first. Search is kind of your entry point to understand what people are interested in, and also a quick way to make sure that if they're looking to get smart on something, that you're there with that answer. I mean, I told a friend of mine who works at a different PR agency, I was doing this. He goes, first thing I do with any client or any issue is I Google it. So search is incredibly critical.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Linda, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, in our pre-call, you asked, is it an afterthought or a first thought when it comes to client campaigns? And it absolutely has to be a first thought, because we're operating in a communications landscape in which the lines between channels have not just blurred, they've completely merged. And so to the consumers, the customers we want to reach on behalf of our clients, it's all one experience. So I think that requires a really holistic 360 view in how you look at data and insights, but then how you plan a communications campaign. And I think of search both as a source of insights and intelligence to inform my campaign planning, but then also as a channel in how do we then engage and show up with the customers that we want to reach.
And I would add to Linda as well. I mean, in the olden days, and we still do this, but we want to see how many key messages come back to us through our earned media coverage. And I think with search, it's very similar in the sense that if we know something's resonating, then the algorithm is going to reflect that, and we're going to see the results of our effective work. So it's not only a central part of it, it's an objective. It is an overall piece of that whole share of voice, share of market. I mean, all of that is tied together, where we want to make sure that the work that we are doing on behalf of our clients is reflected in search, because ultimately that's going to lead to conversions or visits, whatever metric they're looking for as far as success.
Fascinating. Yeah, and I'm hearing a lot of this, discussion on using search not only as a channel or medium to, talk to an audience or reach out to them and engage them, but as a way to, provide data around the value of, PR. Is that what you're also discussing here as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the old idea that yesterday's headline wraps today's fish. I think we're looking at this now, where how do we continue that that lifespan of the earned coverage that we're gaining on behalf of our clients, and how are we creating this content and giving it a life that exists beyond the day that it's published. And I think, whether it's owned or earned, or even paid content, I mean, how do we keep our clients front and center? And search is a huge piece of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us nicely to our second, poll question is, where does everyone fall on the idea of the value of, page one search results over, versus rather page one news? I know in my own experience, having performed agency work and digital reputation management, that over the course of a lifetime or of an asset's lifetime, page one search results can be far more impactful sometimes than the original stories, release. How does everyone feel about that?
And I can jump in, and sorry.
Yeah, please.
A bit of an issue. So if I missed anything or I repeat, I lost connection for a minute. But to me, you look at, a page one, news story is a one-day affair. A page one Google result is I don't want to say a lifetime affair, but it is definitely something that's going to get you in front of individuals, a lot more frequently than being on the front page. And I think one of the biggest values too is page one is really important, because I forget, and apologies, but during the Fireside Chat, someone was talking about unstructured data. And I always kind of look at Google as, it's a self-selecting data set, because if you're putting out information, or if you want people to find that this is an audience that is actively saying, no, I am in this bucket of people you want to be talking to, so please talk to me about this, as opposed to using third or first party data and being able to kind of put it in front of people and kind of through a more traditional advertising method.
Awesome. We do have an audience question if anyone feels like responding to it. But the question is, what's the worst client search results you've ever seen, and how did you have to go about remediating them? Does anyone have a good story? Neil?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a classic case of, cold call from someone looking for PR services, right? So in good practice, I had a wonderful chat with the gentleman, went to Google and found his company name and his name having filed bankruptcy. And so his PR call to me was not about helping him figure out how to change the narrative on his bankruptcy, but he was trying to promote his business. And I had to kind of stop him very quickly and say, I'm sorry, but first things first, we've got to fix this before we can do the next thing. So, I think this goes to the notion of, whether that's page one news and the search results that keep on giving, and those are the gifts that keep on giving, which I think goes to, I know the conversation we'll have a little bit later on, is the power of consistent content and how the blurred lines of what we think as professionals who are in this business is legitimate content, and how our clients will view that, and no less consumers, because I think that's where it really gets very, very tricky for consumers who, whether it's a Google review or whether it's a front page article that pops up from the Washington Post or a blog post from the company. I think I find a lot more of my conversations of helping folks understand that. But most importantly, the worst result was that, I ended up having several other conversations with this gentleman, and he couldn't get his head around the point why I just couldn't write a press release for him and just send it out promoting his services.
Matt, you look like you want to jump in.
Oh no, when we were talking about these issues, and people have bad search results, and the importance of managing it, the irony is that at least in my experience, most communications organizations aren't really monitoring how they're showing up in search, right? Like we have media monitoring tools. I think every organization can look at it from the lens of, like, if I search for my brand, what's the news coverage, but not from the lens of what's showing up on page one search. And I think that there is also an opportunity to build solutions that more proactively monitor these things for our clients as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'll shamelessly say that's part of the reason why we started developing Lightbox Search. We won't talk about that too much now, but I think this is a good transition to one of our next questions, which is that, you know, Google itself has really changed a lot since it was first launched. You know, I think it was 1996. It began as an indexing, platform for just online websites. And it didn't really have that dynamic power it does today until much later. In my personal opinion, I really consider search results today as content that you would need to monitor and analyze and improve like you would other forms of media like social posts or, web content and things like that. How do you feel about that, Matt?
Absolutely. I think there is, on one hand, no shortage of data that a communications organization has access to and is monitoring. But this is one of those where I think it's in people's blind spots. And I think there's an opportunity to think through where this fits into a PR organization's toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry Weber, you were talking about the change of, Google over the years and how you've seen it grow and evolve. Would you say search results have reached the point where they themselves, would be considered, content? And is that the responsibility of the PR professional today?
I think it is. And I also think as really Google has all the ammunition right now to dominate the technology scene for the foreseeable future, even more than Amazon and Apple. And I see it's one of its owned properties becoming even larger than Google itself as a search engine eventually, and that's YouTube. And I think PR professionals have got to leverage the use of visuals and visualization and storytelling and video. I think LinkedIn has done a very good job at that, but you don't really search on LinkedIn as much, So, but I look at the power that earned media is having with especially video presentations. And it's amazing to me how many clients, including big companies, if you go spend a couple hours on YouTube and you look at all of, say, IBM's videos, it's amazing how they look like they're coming from different companies, and it's not consistent in their look, their feel, their messages. They're all over the place. It seems a lot more controlled in presentation on LinkedIn right now. It must be from an organizational point of view. But I look at the PR person as a purveyor of visual content that has impact on a consistent basis. So,
Linda, I see you nodding. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I'd like to build on it because I think over the past 2 years, in response to the pandemic, protest over social justice, the polarizing political issues, I think brands and companies overall are more reputation conscious, as a sense of purpose and purpose driven has been front and center. And I think that has put search more in the spotlight, and people are looking at it more carefully. And it's not just about customers, it's about how am I showing up with communities? How am I showing up, particularly with the talent that I so desperately need in the context of the talent shortage that has just become exacerbated over the past 2 years. So I think that has set the stage where now there is this sometimes a preoccupation over search results, and even one negative search result that might be from a less than credible source has overwhelming importance. But I do think it has changed the nature of the conversations about reputation management, and then what the expectations are in a brief, how we as agencies come and are briefing in and supporting the solutions that we're bringing forward.
That's a great answer. And I want to call on Julie to weigh in on some of the solutions, her her experience and her agency provide, as well as I want to take a moment to address another question we have from one of our audience members, Lynn. Thank you. Lynn has asked, she gets, she gets thousands of emails promising her page one on Google search. She deletes them all and she has no idea what kind of credibility these agencies and companies have. Your comments, please. I open the floor to Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I couldn't agree more with Linda's comments. Whether we like it or not, the role of public relations and search engine optimization are inextricably linked. We're talking today about search specifically, but this brings to light the broader conversation about the fact that we now live in a digital first world, and digital communications no longer exist in a silo. Our clients' digital presence is really an extension of who they are and what they stand for. So as agencies, it's so important for us from a public relations standpoint to help them proactively manage how they show up online. And with that said, agencies are missing out on an opportunity if they're not offering SEO as a service, or at a minimum, adopting a data-driven, search-optimized mindset. And I would add to that, in addition to having the right tools and technology, such as Lightbox, successful digital reputation management is also about proactivity and having a really strong content strategy in place to promote content that really accentuates a client's desired image and enhances its reputation ultimately.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just how do we feel about Lynn's question? Companies promising page one search results. Do we trust them?
No, not at all.
No.
Because half the time, if you Google those people, they're not on page one.
Aaron, sorry, John, I didn't mean to interrupt, please.
Oh.
No, I saw Aaron shaking his head. What are you thinking right now?
No, I mean, there are huge players out there on a number of different topics. To be able to say that you're going to be able to outrank them overnight is just not realistic. Oftentimes we have to counsel clients that, that see like a bad piece of press coverage or, bad information like that bankruptcy piece you mentioned on the top of Google, that SEO is a much longer term play. And it's something that should inform strategy over the long run. If you're looking for a quick fix to throw something above a negative search result, look to SEM maybe. And throw dollars at it, but even that is not going to garner the types of clicks that you're looking for. So we have to constantly set expectations that, strong SEO strategy won't necessarily bring you up to the top immediately, but it will bring you up to the top for people that are searching for very relevant topics that are going to be more important to the messages that you're trying to spread.
And it's playing sorry, Jeffrey.
No, please.
I was just going to say it's playing off of that idea of the wizardry of SEO, SEM. I mean, I think there's still so many people out there, that like Neil's comment earlier and story earlier, that think that there's a magic button that we can push to fix everything. And I think that the lack of understanding is what leads to companies who can make statements like that. It leads to them staying in business, I guess. And to Julie's point, it's much more important to create, I'm going to use my most hated overused word, the authentic, and authenticity of your brand through the content that's going up. And it's not always a quick fix, that's, and to Aaron's point, that's not something that can be fixed overnight. That's something that is part of a larger overarching strategy that needs to be a cornerstone of everything that you're doing from a communications perspective. So anyone that promises that, it's almost like the business that promises make $5,000 in your first week. That's the end result. And if someone's leading with that, they're usually lying to you. So that's how I always look at it.
Yeah, SEO is really it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
That's true. That's true.
Absolutely. And I always advise folks, that SEO and search engine ranking is an art and a science. The art is in part this ecosystem of content that I think Julie was referring to, and so many others have, that it's not just the blog posts, it's not just the press release, it's not just the hits in media, it's all of the above. It's also how you're using social media. I don't know how many conversations we have, and just trying to walk through clients on how best to use the various platforms, and on now almost a weekly basis have to apologize because the algorithms have changed in a Facebook or a LinkedIn or a Twitter, and how frequency sometimes isn't the best solution. And so educating them on ecosystem, and then I can tell you, I was working with a foundation, and we hired a firm to help us do a lot of CPC campaigns and help us manage the back end of how we were managing and posting content, as well as managing our social. So some of the analytics they were providing us, again, all boil back to content, right? And what, they constantly were coming back to us and saying, please lay out your campaign. What is your editorial strategy? And then fundamentally, they helped us interpret whether it was in Google Analytics or what the Facebook Analytics or the Twitter and IG or Instagram Analytics were telling us to inform us how we were connecting with the audience we were hoping to connect to or thought we were connecting to, and fine tune that to grow an audience over time. But it took several years, right? The CEO got increasingly restless because he was like, how come this isn't happening faster? But I think over time, the value of that ended up paying off, and it was a foundation. So ultimately is how do we convert those folks to donors? And so once the dollars began, coming through, the strategy began playing out.
Yeah, you really have to remember sometimes those bottom line objectives when you're performing this kind of work. But that leads really nicely again into another, and thank you for all these amazing questions we're getting from our viewers. We have another good one. What would be initial do's and don'ts for making progress on improving an organization's SEO strategy? Does anyone want to jump in and take that? I'm seeing Matt sit forward, so I'm going to take that as Matt. You want to jump in?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think the comments that were made earlier about this not being a short-term strategy is absolutely true. And I think even framing the search strategy in the context of Google is also very narrow. Like, you have to think, how are you showing up in a LinkedIn search or on a Facebook search? And so I think oversimplifying the task is probably the biggest mistake that people make.
I was going to say something similar to that. I think Google to date has made it seem it's like a very remedial kind of thing, search. And actually in the hands of earned media and reputation management, it's actually very complex. And one example I would give you is across all those platforms like that you just mentioned, we have a client, John Deere, that we're trying the last 7 years to position more as a software and technology company, not just a green tractor company, and also a company that has a purpose for reputation. And the purpose is to have better yields at farms so that we can feed more people as the globe has more people. And so that just creates an issue where, gee, if somebody's searching on any of those platforms for companies that are doing the right thing to try to alleviate poverty and bring food to other countries, that Deere pops up with some of their solutions and what they're talking about with their content and their videos. And so you can start to see and piece together a broad reputation strategy that has multiple narrative stories across platforms, probably starting with Google, but including YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, et cetera, Instagram, which is becoming more important to a lot of the earned media people. So I'm glad you raised that point. So,
well, speaking of the earned media people, we do have another question. This is great. I'll put this out to my colleague, Larry Moskowitz, because this is something I think, near and dear to the Lightbox mission. What tactical skills do you think PR pros need to learn to be fluent in SEO?
Yeah, I think a lot of what's been said, I can't agree with. I have to agree with all of it. It is holistic. I think the first step is the SEO information providers. I won't name the companies, but there's a good dozen of them out there, have fire hoses of information. It's great if you're working Coca-Cola marketing for Kazakhstan. and you're trying to figure out why you're not ranking better or why negative posts are showing up. But for the average public affairs, public relations, even large corporations, Fortune hundreds, they either have the fire hoses or they have nothing in terms of data. So the information, there are probably only 10 or 12 key points. Is your main web page loading too slowly? Yes or no? What's the MOZ or domain authority of it? Is it low or is it high? Is this content, the one question we get all the time, how long is this content going to be there? How many of you gotten that one? How long is this bad story going to sit there? So understanding probably a dozen key statistics mean everything. This is not rocket science. It is a marathon, but it's still running. And it is the combination, I believe, of all of our old techniques from the days of press releases with typewriters to visual content today, whether imagery or video. But it's recognizing you got to understand where is it going to rank on Google and for how long. Google does control it. Talking about Bing is kind of wasting 4% of your time or wasting time on 4% of the audience. So our view is that it's really those statistics. If you can get an MRI, which we tried to build with our Lightbox technology, and understand, wait a minute, the bone is broken here, not there. And wait, we can't overcome this Vanity Fair story, huh? Vanity Fair's got a domain authority of 91. It's higher than most newspapers. Unless you know that, you're going to try to do battle with it with things that have domain authority beneath that. So knowledge is power. And our view is PR is power, but even among the news release services. I mean, from the old days when I was at PR Newswire, it was a duopoly, PR Newswire and Business Wire. Then came along Globe, and now there are 2 dozen of them, 3 dozen. But guess what? They have different domain authorities. So a news release on one is not the same as a news release on another. One might last a day or 2 or 3. The other one may never ever even show up. So it's what are you going after? It informs your PR strategy. I don't need media coverage in a medium that has a domain authority of 42. I need one that has a domain authority of 90. And I need to be able to pump out content with such volume. And then my favorite phrase, Jesse's sick of hearing it, is to build a digital fortress for your clients. Ensure their website is 100% against all those statistics. Ensure you're pumping out regular content that's ranking high. You got to probably have foundations or subsidiaries that could be appropriate for additional secondary websites. So that's another kind of tactic that we advise many organizations and companies. Hey, set up a website for that foundation, make sure your name's on it, make sure it's optimized. It's amazing how many utterly simple things people are unaware are weak that could be easily strengthened.
So if I can jump in and just kind of sum that up. Yeah, Linda, I'll pass the mic to you, please.
No, I was going to say, to build on what Larry said, if we think about all of us, our practitioners, and those of us, those of you listening in today, regardless of your specialty in the communications world or in the PR agency, everyone has to be conversant in search. You can't say, I'm just a media relations specialist, or I focus on digital, or I do this. It's important to add value to your client, to grow professionally, to bring that holistic mindset and be able to think about, search and its role for your client in that sector or marketplace, and be able to work with the team or experts within your agency to bring, as Larry was saying, that kind of thinking forward, so you're best positioning the client in the campaigns that you're designing. Like, this is not just about having specialists who deal with search. Each of us has to bring a certain level of knowledge to add value to our client relationships and professionally to continue to grow.
Absolutely. That's a great point. We're getting a lot of questions in. I just want to throw my 2 cents on that to sum up what Larry was saying. I think if we're talking hard skills, performing a basic digital audit of web content is an essential skill for a PR professional. Being able to measure the relative strength of content in a competitive sense to see how it will or can rank up against each other. And then looking at those, Larry was calling them statistics, those key statistics and ranking factors that Google employs that you have control over. There's going to be, content driven elements, such as where you use keywords that you can really take advantage of in order to optimize your own web content, like press releases. And I wanted to bring up press releases because we're getting a lot of questions, and we have one on press releases now, since this comes up a lot. I've seen many times with corporate clients that used to have a lot of old press, decades old, coming up and being repopulated on search engines in force when new news, such as earned media, gets published in volume and consistently showing that actual long-term longevity and thought. This is a bit of a long question. Thought leadership going back a couple of decades, whereas the new frequent earned media, the search results showed nothing due to the long time inactivity. I believe what the question here is, what is the value of building up powerful like evergreen content versus, something like more frequently publishing lots of new news releases. But I'm not 100% sure if that attendee wants to jump in with some clarification. Aaron, do you want to weigh in on that idea?
Yeah, I think more than ever, and I know we're all sick of talking about the pandemic, but we were thrown into a situation where a lot of different brands that we all work with are front and center in some capacity, and some aspect of their business took a hit or could help in that sort of situation. And it really provided an opportunity in an environment where there was so much misinformation going around about a number of different issues, for brands to play that very steady hand and that steady voice in terms of like very informative information. So I'm thinking about, a cleaning company we work with over the course of the pandemic, where it was less about just throwing out the name of the brand and being like, we can help you here, but rather using search to understand what it is that people have questions and concerns about, what's on the top of their mind, what are they most scared about that this particular brand might be able to help with, tapping into that, and then creating that sort of evergreen content, releasing press releases that directly address those sorts of questions and concerns that the consumer might have, and advocating for different events or different blog posts or different social content that would directly tackle the questions that people had most frequently. So that's a great example of, using keyword research to inform sort of, earned media outreach, blog content, press releases that can directly answer those questions, offer peace of mind to the consumer, and make your brand a trusted resource for that person to go back to over and over again, not only when they purchase products, but when they have pressing questions that you can help address.
Awesome. Julie, did you want to say something there? No.
I think, going back to the question of the do's and don'ts, one thing that came to mind for me as we all were speaking was, I think the idea of search engine optimization and the first page of Google results is really daunting if you think about it from the, an objective standpoint of showing up well on that first page. But I think what might be helpful to many is just thinking about how to incorporate an SEO focused mindset into every aspect of communications and in every digital communications vehicle, which might make it seem a lot less daunting and, kind of get communicators thinking about SEO in the right way, whether that's web content or blog posts, incorporating those keywords, just really taking a data-driven approach to all those various content vehicles.
Can I answer 3 questions that are coming up in our little Q&A window? One I asked earlier, how do you measure the value? When I was talking about the statistic of the domain authority,
I sent out an answer to that, just so you know.
Okay. Well, the group might want to know. I think we have found that by and large, both in this country and in Europe, Moz, M-O-Z, offers domain authority on virtually every domain of note. They have a numerical system from 0 to 100. That's pretty much the authority. It's still the Bible. It's a private company. That information, I believe, Jesse, am I right? It's free.
Parts of it. Yeah, they offer some free measurement within limits.
So limits, but that's one. Another one was PR sources. Here, I'll give a little plug for Lightbox Search. We built it just to give that first question, which is, what are some resources for PR pros to learn about SEO and how to do a digital audit? we've got those answers on lightboxsearch.com. So we worked a lot to try to pull together a lot of information on this from SEO experts, SEM experts, the PR industry, and we tried to condense it into something. So I think you'd find some educational material there. Those are a couple questions I thought were worth answering, but certainly the domain authority.
And I
Absolutely.
Can I jump
Please.
back to, so Aaron brought up the dreaded pandemic, and I wanted to actually share an example when it comes to timing and all of that. I was recently on a vacation in Austin, Texas, and my wife and I were looking for the best tacos. And as anyone knows in Austin, there's a million amazing tacos. They're usually in trucks, and the timeliness of that news is really important. So I found myself looking at dates of roundups and news articles much more than I would have pre-pandemic, because I wasn't sure if that truck was still going to be operating or be located where it was previously. Same with some of our hotel clients. No one wants to show up at a hotel bar and find out that the hotel is shuttered due to the pandemic and things like that. So when it comes to the timeliness of news and how that shows up in rankings, we are encountering that a lot more frequently, where we're seeing news that may be 2 or 3 years old. And at this point, with certain businesses, especially small businesses, how do you look at a 2017 dated article and take that as being the truth now in 2022, or even a 2019 article? So I do think when it comes to how your news is presented through search, it is more important for almost every business to have the newer, more timely ones up, whether it's through a press release, or through content that you're putting out yourself, or through earned content, to basically show, hey, this is how we're operating in this day and age in 2022 versus what may have changed from last year or 2 years earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And why does that happen? Just actually, I got some clarification from our audience member. Why does that happen? That for organizations with new news coming out, that old news, from 2017 or even older, why is that come back, to bite people once again? Does anyone want to jump in? Neil, David?
I mean, I can, speculate out without, obviously it's one of those without knowing all the facts of the case, but, I think a lot of it is if it's still living on their website, if it's still indexed, if it's, from, Vanity Fair, New York Times, those are very highly respected websites that are going to start to have that. So I think the first and most important thing, and this is kind of jumping back, but also echoing what a lot of people said, is that, SEO starts with your website and being able to go through, and PR professionals needing to know how to draft content in a way that is going to be appropriate for the search engines. Also understanding, kind of the metadata and other, some of the technical aspects of what goes into a website. Not saying you have to be able to build one, but knowing how to kind of populate that content, knowing how it's structured, and making sure that you're working to get that content in the right place to kind of maximize the Google spiders crawling the pages to find the right information.
Awesome. Neil, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just this education that we have to do with our clients. I think I'll use the term, we all have to be multilingual these days in terms of moving beyond some of the traditional speak of press releases, which I still believe have value. And I think we even have to explain the role of press releases and how they can be and will be used, right? Almost disaggregating this sense of, well, is a press release going to get me a story? Well, probably not. So there's another part of the strategy that goes back to what Larry Weber was just saying with John Deere. If you just call up a business reporter and say, hey, you want to do a story about John Deere? They're like, well, what else is new, right? When you begin to frame that bigger story about this powerful mission of what the role that John Deere plays and how it is trying to play its role as a trusted thought leader, using multiple venues to share that story, and not just through its product sales, but through the strategic leadership, through its website, through thought leadership in publications and contributorships in other forms of media. Those begin to tie the connections, and I think John makes a case of on this the resurgence of press releases that will pop up from the past. I think, again, goes back to consistency in the messaging. You know, if you just come to a PR firm for a burst of activity and go away, then you're really not valuing our true service, because I think you have to think of it long-term as how you continuously position your brand, your executives, your products, your services in multiple forms of media nowadays to reach your audience. Otherwise, yeah, the old news will continue to be out there, but unless you're continuing to push new news, new thoughts, new ideas, using all your platforms pointing to each other, then you're ending up with a frustrated sentiment of, that old release keeps on popping up, that old blog post keeps on popping up, or even in social, you want to see your newsfeed pop up with something from 6 months ago, just like a post, right? And suddenly, all of a sudden, your newsfeed recalibrates itself with that post that was done from several months ago. So be strategic and think through all of these pieces and not just one piece.
All right. Thank you so much, Neil, for answering that question and taking that on. I think to conclude the event, I want to take a look at those poll responses, if we can see how everyone weighed in with that. There they are. So it looks like overwhelmingly search results are central to everyone's PR efforts. I'm really glad to hear that. It means I'm not crazy, at least. And over the course of an asset's lifetime, 79% believe that page one search results are more powerful than page one news. That's awesome for me anyway. Does anybody want to, of our panelists, want to weigh in with some closing remarks on that? No? All right.
I'll just
Matt,
quickly say
please.
that, with search, as with everything else, is know your audience, how they behave online. There isn't just one page one, there's an algorithm that's delivering it. So know your audience and who you're trying to connect with.
And I would just stress the sense of understanding the ecosystem of content nowadays. You know what runs in the New York Times, and it may be a wonderful front page business story, doesn't stand alone and only has a short shelf life if you don't build a campaign around that story once it runs, right? I don't know how many times we're saying, well, that was a great story. Did you share it on social? Oh, should we have done that? Oh, well, but we got the New York. What else do we need to do? It's like lots of things, right? To sustain the value of any single media hit has to be in conjunction and in the spirit of all your social, all your search, how your website is structured, and really having someone, if anyone, at least someone dedicated on the team to coordinate those efforts across the C-suite and across departments and divisions, so there's consistency in branding and messaging every step along the way.
And to Neil's point there, that's definitely, to answer the second question, why not both? Why can't it be page one search results and page and the front page of the newspaper outlet as well? So, I think the goal is to make it so, that's the goal, both.
All right, Julie, did you want to last point of the day?
No, thank you all for a great discussion. Glad to be a part of it.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to Faye over at CommPRO for helping us put on this event. It was really enlightening and exciting for me to talk to everybody. As I said, we'll send out some links and some information to everyone who attended if they would like to learn more about search and about Lightbox. Thank you to Larry Weber and Larry Moskowitz for helping us out with this fireside chat and being panelists as well. We had a great time, and we hope to, be in touch and hear from everybody soon.
Did you want to offer anything, Jesse, to those a couple of people wanted to stay on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to stay on and talk with anybody more about these topics, or discuss Lightbox Search. If anyone would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to stay on and keep talking with us.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have one question from Julia. Thank you. What is Lightbox Search? Lightbox Search is a new technology platform that was created by communications and PR professionals from the agency world in order to help them really take control of search results on behalf of their clients, and also provide search-related solutions, through automated features like search results monitoring, performing easy digital audits of content to help you assess digital strength and identify weaknesses and opportunities for improvement. And just recently, we've released a new feature to help our users understand how they can improve page one search results through specific recommendations and customized action plans. I'd be more than happy to show you it live on a demo. If you'd like to use our Calendly, you can schedule a meeting then. I'm more than happy, if there's any interest, to do a bit of a live walkthrough now, if anyone would like to stick around and see it. Larry, thank you. Larry just posted a link to our website in the chat. I'm going to drop 2 more links. We have a recently released an agency guide, which is called How to Grow Agency Revenue in 2022, which outlines some of our best practices and suggestions to build powerful search results, build that online fortress that Larry was talking about earlier to help prevent or mitigate crises, to drive traffic to the right places, and build search results that are enduring and powerful. Yeah, please let us know if you'd like to see a quick demo of it now, or schedule one on a Calendly. Okay. I am seeing a sure from Larry. I will happily. Let's see, we still have some people on, so why not? Let me just pull up our website. All right. All right, so Lightbox Search is a platform that allows you to run a search for any keyword or phrase to establish, monitoring and analysis of page one or up to 10 pages deep search results. You can enter any keyword or phrase like you would a traditional search engine like Google, with one primary difference in advance being you can select a geographic location to search from. This will let you, let me just see, sorry, we have a question. Okay. This will let you see search results that your audiences are actually seeing, because search results are dynamic and curated specifically for individuals based on their past search behavior and search location. I don't have any good ideas off the top of my head of search terms, but we could just take a look at like Apple, because it's regularly in the news. I will select the United States. We can search for anywhere you can advertise against using the Google Ads platform, and we can pull in organic search results from that location, but we can also do regions like the United States. If anyone has any questions during this, feel free to pop those into the chat. At the top of every set of search results pages, we have 5 info boxes that summarize the content of your search results. The Lightbox Score, which is a kind of a metric you can take to your clients to explain to to them whether or not your search results are good, bad, strong, or weak. And everything is color coded to help you determine at a glance what the breakdown of your content is. So left to right, we have this Lightbox Score, we have the sentiment distribution, we have category distribution, monthly search volume, and advertising information. So on this dashboard, we're blending a lot of different elements of SEO, SEM, and media monitoring technologies to help you as a communicator break down those traditional like silos that exist within, SEO and SEM technology. Just a point about our sentiment analysis, we use AI, so you don't have to keep track of search results every day and determine whether or not they're good or bad. And we are as accurate as Cision or Meltwater, traditional media monitoring services, except we allow our users to correct our AI when it's wrong and save those preferences in for future monitoring. So we can default to your opinion as to whether or not content is good or bad. We can run a recurring search for Apple or whatever we've searched on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And this will let us set up monitoring for our search term or keyword, and we can do this for as many keyword and location combinations as we'd like. Underneath the info boxes are organic search results. We also pull in some rich media that Google creates, like top stories and the knowledge graph, Wikipedia information, as well as related keywords you should also be monitoring that occur within the same searching session. Each result gets a pretty comprehensive but user-friendly digital audit. And this is what Larry was touching on earlier. So instead of what you may be familiar with in really technical advanced SEO platforms, which is that fire hose of information, we do a breakdown of the top 10 metrics that PR professionals and communicators, content creators can impact. Please, as I said, at any point, jump in and ask questions. I can't see anyone here, so I'm just gonna roll through if there are none. But you can go through and compare why one result outranks another. We also pull in domain authority straight from Moz to help you determine not only is the web page optimized, but is it on a strong and authoritative website? This is a really useful tool for determining whether or not your press releases or news results are going to rank highly in Google and last for a long time. If you are a communicator who isn't 100% sure how to improve these results, we do have you covered there as well. We've recently released a new feature that will create a customized action plan based on the results on the page. So once everything's loaded up, you can generate a plan, and we're going to tell you what we see there. So we're going to look at critical news. It seems we really have some here. Was found in position 2, and we're going to tell you why that matters. So position 2, it has an average click-through rate of 24%, and it's going to be visible on all kinds of devices. And 24% of 5 million, it's a pretty big deal. We then give you advice as to what to do, such as earn or publish media on high-ranking publications, issue a news release on a high-ranking service, and then you can click through to find educational content that will help you do just that. So, if you want to learn which newswire services are the highest ranking, we've curated all of that knowledge and information into one place and made it easy for you to access and take advantage of. All of these elements, such as the action plan, individual search results, the related search terms, are downloadable as individual graphics, so you can include them into your own presentations, and you can export this entire page as a PDF or PNG, so you can share it with clients and stakeholders. Once you've set up monitoring or a schedule, what will happen is all of these key data points will get collected along a series of timelines, which will update with each new time this search is performed and saved from that specific location. So once we establish monitoring for Apple, these charts will update and track its score, sentiment distribution, category distribution, and current search volume.